So, Wellness Wednesday today, I'm talking about intermittent fasting for weight loss and wellness. So, general wellness. Challenge I'm running next week, which is a free 7-day fasting challenge. So, I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But what I really just want to share today, I guess, is what intermittent fasting is, and how to know if it is right for you, and the benefits of it, and talk about some of the reasons we would like to intermittent fast. I think the world that I'm in at the moment, because this is my world, I sometimes fall into the trap of thinking everyone is already doing something, and then am constantly reminded by people I'm working with that actually, no, that's not the case. And even though intermittent fasting has been around now, like quite popular for like the last 5-6 years, particularly the last couple of years, I still can fall into the trap of thinking, oh yeah, everyone already knows this, when they actually don't. And my reason for this thinking, I think sometimes, is then I'm reminded when I'm looking at the way people are eating, what people are eating. I'm going through that and working with people one-on-one, and they're not even eating in a 12-hour window, and so fasting is really like a whole new world to them. And so I'm going to just talk from that place of assuming that if you're watching this, maybe you have heard about fasting, but you actually haven't really tried it, and you're not sure if it's right for you, or maybe you've done a little bit of fasting and you're sort of dabbling in it. So I guess the first thing is fasting it's got huge benefits. Like it can have amazing results for weight loss, for if it's done right. That's the disclaimer. For weight loss, for reducing inflammatory conditions, for improving digestion. And the first thing we want to look at when we're looking at fasting is going back a step and actually looking at the way that our bodies are built. A lot of us, a lot of the way our brain is, the way our body functions, is still in that very primal state of being used to going, when we look back through history and evolution of humans, we used to go lots of periods of time without food, and we used to also have seasons. We still have seasons, but the seasons then came with different amounts of carbohydrate, different amounts of fat. In summer it would rain and there would be a lot more pasture. The animals would fatten up. There would be more fat on the animals. There'd also be a lot more fruit, and we would eat and we'd put on weight, and that would actually then help us to get through winter. And then you store food, and your consumption of food changes during the winter as well. There's also a lot of different cultures that have lived on a lot higher fat. There's a lot of different cultures that have lived on like mostly carbohydrate, so we need protein, we need fats. We don't necessarily need carbohydrate. However, this is more just looking at it from an evolutionary point of view, we had periods of time where we didn't eat. We had periods of time where we were starving, had to find food, and we were very adaptable. Our body knew what to do when it got food. It's like, okay, we've got to really put this weight on so that we can last throughout another season. When we're in that fight or flight state, that is that primal, that state of running from a tiger or a bear, with cortisol and adrenaline bursting through our bloods, our body will push all that blood to extremities so we can bolt and stay safe. And so the problem is that we're now faced with this modern day challenge of these stresses in our environment that are causing this stress response, and our body doesn't know that we've got an abundance of food even though our brain does, our cells don't know there's an abundance of food, and our nervous system doesn't know that, every single cell in the body really, doesn't know that there's an abundance of food for most of us everywhere we go. There's huge amounts of carbohydrate available, whether we're in winter or summer, it doesn't matter. We also throw into the mix then us being in that heightened state of alarm, and we're in danger zone and our body is in survival mode, and so we're not going to digest our food properly. We're not going to absorb our nutrients if we're not digesting our food. We're not going to be able to fall pregnant as easily because our body is not safe. We're not safe. We're not going to be able to lose weight as easy because there could be a potential famine coming where there is no food. So this is the way our body is designed, and it really did help us survive through a long period, up until this point, until, say 100 years ago. But now it's like, okay, we're not in that place anymore. And so keep that in mind, and then throw into the mix stress, more stress, lack of other stresses, lack of sleep, chemicals, lack of exercise, a sedentary type lifestyle. And we've got this concoction of not our bodies not being or functioning or moving the way they should be, and then we create this creates inflammation, it creates deficiencies, it creates bodies that are stressed out, that then it rolls on to chronic illness and disease. And so what intermittent fasting has come out, the research that has come out over the last few years is really putting us back into that state of making us more adaptable, making us, our body respond to the conditions in a lot more adaptable way. And so that's what we're looking for when we're going to talk about fasting. But I just want you to, that's the frame of it. I want you to think about how our bodies were and then how we are now with this consumption of excessive food that is very high in carbohydrate, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, overconsumption of food, and constant, consistent, ongoing consumption of food. Even if it's not, someone might eat just small meals all through the day, it could be just as not as beneficial as someone who eats a lot all the time. So when you eat, how you eat it, all of those things really do make an impact. And when we're talking about intermittent fasting, we're talking about having a period of time where we're not having anything but water. Herbal teas and stuff you can get away with. It just depends on what levels, because depends also what's your intention with the fasting. Is it just for weight loss? Is it for longevity? Is it for brain function and cognitive function? Is it to heal your digestion? And your goal and your intention behind the fasting will then also dictate how you go about this. So there's different types of fasting. There's a 12 to 13 hour fast, which is really like the bare minimal. And sometimes this works really well for people, and a lot of people don't even do this. And when I say that, I mean they might have dinner at 8 o'clock at night and then they're eating at 6:30 a.m. the next morning. That's not even 12 hours of fasting. And we want to, when our body is in a fasting state, we go into repair. Our digestion has a rest, and we're not, because when we're eating and digesting food, we're using a lot of energy to do that, and we're not being able to clean up the dead cells. Our immune system isn't able to go and clean up everything else that it needs to do. In particular processes like apoptosis, reducing inflammation, repairing, healing, all that stuff. A lot of it happens when we're not eating. And so our immune system works better when there's not food to also contend with. So that's the first bit. And fasting can then go from 12 hours all the way through to technically a 72-hour fast. Like I've got people I know in my world, friends that have done 2 or 3 week water fast. I've actually got a girlfriend who's just done a 18 day water fast. She's hardcore, hey? but amazing. She's felt amazing afterwards. It'd be interesting to see how her digestion is after that, because I know it can take a while for your digestion to kick in, but there's lots of different fasting is my point. The real beneficial longevity effects of fasting could be something like 3 days. But the what I'm really going to talk about today is just the benefits of fasting on a couple of times a week or a day-to-day basis, yeah? So 12 hours is the minimum, 12 to 13 hours. I like to say to people, try 13 hours. And then moving up to 16-hour fast. And doing this at least 3 to 4 times a week can be really beneficial. Some people like to do the 5-2 where they're calorie restricting on certain days and stuff. But for the most part, fasting and having longer periods of fasting can be really helpful. And we naturally do this when we sleep. You know, we sleep and we are healing and repairing. That is what sleep is for. But the benefits of fasting can be reduction in inflammation, because our immune system is repairing and healing. It can be amazing for weight loss because we become more adaptable, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Also amazing for longevity, for cognitive function. And also, you know, one of the big things when it comes to weight loss is insulin resistance. What I want you to know is that everyone is individual, right? So what is right for me as a female in her 30s, I'll say her 30s, in her late 30s, is very different to what a man in his 40s or his 20s is going to need. You know, the ability and the adaptability is very different. Some men work really well on an 18-hour fast or, you know, eating once a day fast. Women, I wouldn't be really saying that because it can stress our hormones out. And also knowing that there needs to be flexibility in how you do it, so it's not going to be the same all the time. So you might go through a period of fasting and you might want to then have a rest where you just go back to 13 hours fasting. This is called adaptability. Metabolic adaptability really is what we're looking for. So everyone's not individual. You know, women with hormonal issues, including thyroid, is going to be different. It's going to be different. You know, I wouldn't be recommending really anything longer than 13 hours if you're pregnant. You've got to, and if you're trying to be pregnant, trying to fall pregnant, I wouldn't say anything more than 14 hours, just to be on the safe side. People need carbohydrates, people need nutrients, making sure you're getting that in. But insulin resistance is the big driver, and one of the big drivers for carbohydrate intolerance, meaning you don't metabolize your carbohydrate very well, and insulin's part of that. And the insulin resistance, now insulin, I've explained to people before, if you've been watching me for a little while, is insulin is like, imagine there's a party on in a house, and insulin is the gatekeeper. He's standing at the front door and he's knocking the door to let someone else into the party, but the party's so loud that they can't really hear, so then they have to keep knocking. You have to keep knocking really loud. And so then you actually might need a couple of people knocking, like just more people knocking at the door to get into the party. And so that's what happens with insulin resistance. And so insulin is the party hormone, but it also promotes fat storage. So we need insulin for our body, our cells to get glucose, but we don't need too much, and we need our insulin receptors on our cells to be sensitive, because insulin then will go into the cell and then it gets converted into ATP, and that is our energy source. So glucose. So, you know, we need that, we need to be that, and a lot of the time we've got this dysfunctional conversion of energy happening for a lot of different reasons. Often vitamin deficiencies, mineral deficiencies, overconsumption of carbohydrate, all of those things, and they're connected. So, you know, if you are insulin resistant, some of the signs and symptoms that you might have is weight gain, difficulty burning fat, so difficulty losing fat. You might feel like you look at something and you put on weight. You have cravings, particularly for carbohydrate. You feel exhausted consistently. You feel tired after eating. You feel tired during exercise. And you might have one of these or all of these. You might have elevated fasting glucose, or you also want to know what your fasting insulin is, but elevated fasting glucose can be and elevated fasting insulin. You may have a bigger waist circumference, so you've put on a lot of belly fat. Your cholesterol levels, you would have high triglycerides and low HDL, which is a high density lipoprotein, which basically is the good cholesterol. I don't like using that term, but that's what it's called. Hypertension, you could even have skin tags, which is an indicator of insulin resistance. Adult acne as well. High hemoglobin A1C, which is basically like a long-term marker of what your blood sugar levels have been doing, and anything over 5.5 is an indicator that there's these unregulated blood sugar levels, and we really want to get on top of that. So the thing that fasting will help with is it will help with unregulated blood sugar levels. And so these unregulated blood sugar levels can cause so much issues, and what we're trying to do is regulate that, and then all the other benefits. So high blood sugar will actually damage the cells. It can damage our blood vessels. It can cause our cholesterol to go up. A lot of people still think that it's saturated fat that causes our blood cholesterol to go up. That's actually not true. The correlation between saturated fat and heart disease is, basically been debunked. There's very little evidence of that now. And it's more to do with high carbohydrate consumption, unregulated blood sugar levels, which can cause your blood lipids to go up, as well as other markers. And I can tell from someone's blood work, if their cholesterol, if their triglycerides are high, if their hemoglobin A1C is high, that they've got blood sugar regulation issues. I can also tell from the signs and symptoms. So the high blood sugar causes damages to the cell, and this is what can cause inflammation as well. So really got to get on top of it. It's one of the things that I'm really like, all right, let's get on top of this, and we want that metabolic flexibility. And so I guess with weight loss, part of the benefits with fasting is you will naturally eat a bit less, because you are eating in a smaller window. But the other side of that is you can be more lenient on yourself in that window if you're doing fasting correctly. The idea is that some people will go, it's restricted calories and fasting, which it will naturally be with, but there's also that ability to be able to adapt and burn a little bit more. Having said that, it is also important to understand that having a really high carbohydrate diet, if you're doing intermittent fasting, will prove to be really challenging, because you won't be able to fast as well. So the way I like to explain it to people is, pretend you've got a fire. It's a campfire. You either put a kindling on the fire all the time, or you are putting a big fat log on once there's some heat there, and it can burn all day long. And that's the difference between the way that you're eating. If you're eating constant carbohydrate, like lots of wheat, lots of bread, lots of crackers, you might have a sandwich, you might have toast for breakfast, sandwich for lunch. All of that is really going to elevate your blood glucose levels, and you're not going to get in enough nutrients, because you're not getting in enough fresh living food. But it can really make it hard even if you are fasting, I think, personally. That's my opinion, just from what I see. And so the other thing that's important to really point out, if you are going to do fasting, is you've got to make sure the quality of your food is really super important, because one of the things that will fuck up, a woman's hormones with fasting is a lack of nutrients and the lack of enough food. So if they are calorie restricting, it can mess with your cycle. And I've spoken about this before, where a woman will need more energy between her period, between her ovulation and her period. We naturally need more energy because our temperature has risen, because we're trying to keep the uterine line, we are keeping the uterine lining in place in case an egg gets fertilized. That takes more energy. We need more energy naturally in the second half. Or I see a lot of women, even if they're trying to eat calorie restrict or eat lower, and not understanding that, yeah, actually I'm a little bit more hungry second half. I probably need a few more starchy vegetables or root vegetables, just things with maybe a little bit more fruit, just with a bit more substance. And then they'll go to looking for chips and chocolate and stuff, because they're not getting the energy in and the cravings start. So that's really important. Fasting, particularly with your cycle, honouring your cycle and understanding that there might be times when you don't feel like it. A couple of days before your period, before your cycle starts, and a few days when your cycle starts, you might not want to fast for longer than 12 hours. Understanding your body and what's right for you. But the important part is you must get the nutrients in. If you're going to fast and not get the nutrients in, not do testing, not get in the right amount of electrolytes, it's going to cause problems in the long term. Maybe not in the short term, but maybe in the long term. And it can put us into fight or flight and that stress response, and be heavy on the adrenal glands. So it's finding that balance of going, okay, I'm going to fast, but I've also got to make sure the quality of the food I'm getting in is really good, that I'm getting in enough water, I'm moving my body, all of those things. And it's never just one thing, guys, you know that. So back to the high blood sugar. This is one of the things that it will really refine, really help with. I find it really beneficial. Me personally, I have found when I am fasting more, and not having as much carbohydrate and as much sugar, my skin is a lot better. It's a lot clearer. I feel a lot better. I've got a lot more energy. And so I go through phases, but I know fasting for me for 16 hours a couple of times a week really does benefits. And then the other days I'll fast for 14. Sometimes 13, but never any less really. So if I finish eating at 7:30 at night, I'm not really going to be eating till 10:30, 11:30 in the morning. With the fasting, there is some really good apps that you can download. There's one called Zero, which I really love. And if it's something that you want to try and you've not tried it before, you would like to do it with the support of other people, I'm going to be running a fasting challenge which starts next Monday. And it will be run in this group, but there's going to be a Zoom call, 2 Q&As, and there'll be some emails and stuff for support. And so it will be in this group, but it won't be in this group. So if you want to be part of the challenge, and you want you want to get on board and you want to be able to connect with me and pick my brain, then you will need to sign up. I will put the link in the comments, and it starts next Monday, so you can start to prepare yourself. And that is it. I hope you found that helpful. If you've got any questions, please ask below. Please also, if you want anyone else to come and join you in the challenge, please share them the link below as well, so that they can come in and join it, and you guys can do it as buddies, because doing something together is always fun. And I will see you all soon. All right, ciao. Have a good afternoon.